Have you ever wondered why certain touches linger in your memory long after the moment has passed? Not the usual kind, the quick, distracted brush or the casual handshake, but those rare touches that feel like they awaken something deep inside, making you crave more, as if a silent language was spoken skin to skin. It's almost like a secret code, a magnetism that goes beyond the surface. Today, we're going to explore that mysterious connection through a lens inspired by Carl Jung's insights, uncovering why some touches don't just fade away but instead echo in our hearts long into the night. I remember once meeting Julia. She was a graphic designer living in downtown Brooklyn, surrounded by the constant hum of city life and the smell of roasted coffee beans drifting from her favorite cafe on the corner. Julia wasn't searching for romance. In fact, she had been wary of intimacy for years, partly due to past disappointments and partly because she felt misunderstood even by those closest to her. But one evening, during a casual gathering with friends at her apartment, something shifted. It started with a simple touch. Her close friend Mark reached out to steady her as she laughed too hard and nearly lost balance on her high heels. That brief contact, just his hand lightly resting on her forearm, sparked an unexpected warmth that unsettled yet intrigued her. What she didn't realize was that this touch wasn't just physical. It bypassed conscious thought and tapped directly into an unspoken part of herself. That subtle connection stirred feelings Julia had buried deep, the part longing for genuine closeness without words or pressure. What is it about such touches that can make someone call for more, as some might say? To understand this, we need to consider how Jung described human connection, not merely as external interaction but as an encounter with our own inner worlds reflected through others. This is where things get fascinating. When someone touches you in a way that resonates with your hidden self, your unconscious, it ignites a dialogue within you that's hard to ignore. Jung believed that beneath our everyday awareness lies what he called the personal unconscious, filled with forgotten memories, desires, fears, and potentials. When someone's touch aligns with a part of this hidden landscape, say, a longing for safety or acceptance, it activates emotions that feel immediate and profound. It's like your body remembers what your mind might have forgotten or dismissed. Imagine Julia's case again but zoom in on what happened after Mark's touch. She felt unexpectedly calm yet energized. There was no rush or awkwardness, just presence. A week later, she found herself seeking moments with him again. Not necessarily romantic but meaningful contact that soothed and awakened something dormant inside her. This is key. The impact of touch isn't solely about physical sensation but about emotional resonance. How it echoes within the soul's chambers shaped by past experiences and innate needs. Jung would suggest this is because every person carries archetypes, universal patterns present across humanity, that influence how we respond to others at a subconscious level. One archetype relevant here might be the nurturer, or healer, the aspect within us craving comfort and repair when life feels fractured. A touch aligned with this archetype feels like homecoming. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to survival instincts wrapped in emotion. So how can we apply this understanding to create connections where touch becomes more than skin deep? First, awareness is crucial. Noticing how different kinds of touch affect us personally instead of dismissing them as mere physical contact. Try this now. Next time you meet someone you trust, a friend or partner, observe how their hand resting on your shoulder or their fingers brushing yours make you feel inside. Are you relaxed, anxious, curious? Does it stir memory or desire? Pay attention not just externally but also inwardly, to subtle shifts in mood or sensation triggered by this contact. Here's a small exercise you can do alone if no one is around. Gently place your hand over your heart and breathe deeply 3 times. As you do so, imagine yourself receiving comfort or reassurance from an invisible presence, not imagined romantically but rather as self-compassion incarnate. Notice which parts of your body relax or tense up during this moment and what emotions arise. Why does this matter? Because developing sensitivity toward your internal responses helps differentiate between mechanical touch, a handshake given out of habit, and meaningful contact that truly moves us. This attunement creates space for authentic encounters where both people are present not only physically but emotionally and spiritually. Now consider something curious I've noticed while guiding others through similar practices. Many resist acknowledging these subtle reactions because they fear vulnerability or judge themselves for needing closeness. Yet ironically, ignoring these signals often leads to feeling isolated despite being surrounded by people. A paradox Jung himself hinted at when discussing human alienation caused by repression of authentic needs. And yes, I'm guilty too. I've caught myself brushing off sensations as just nerves or overthinking, when really it was my inner world trying to communicate something important through body language I had ignored for too long. So here's an invitation. Try embracing these moments without rushing them away with explanations or distractions like checking your phone. We all did. Notice what emerges when you honor even small touches, noticing their potential to reveal hidden layers within yourself and others. Of course, context matters greatly too. Consent and mutual comfort are non-negotiable boundaries here, which might seem obvious but bear repeating because even in therapeutic settings misunderstandings about touch occur frequently. Returning briefly to Julia's story. After those early encounters with Mark's reassuring gesture, she consciously invited more meaningful forms of connection into her life. Not just physical but emotional sharing born from trust nurtured by genuine presence rather than obligation. It wasn't instant magic. It took patience and willingness to face discomforts like fear of rejection or old wounds resurfacing unexpectedly during vulnerable moments. But gradually she learned to recognize which touches felt nourishing versus those triggering walls built from past pain, a kind of personal map guiding toward deeper intimacy without losing herself. If you want to explore this further, and maybe uncover what kinds of touches resonate uniquely with your unconscious, you might find it helpful to keep a journal over several days noting interactions involving physical contact. Who initiated it? How did it feel physically? What emotions surfaced right after? This simple practice opens doors toward conscious awareness rarely accessed otherwise, a first step toward transforming ordinary encounters into meaningful exchanges charged with emotional depth. And hey, since we're diving into these intimate territories together, and because sharing helps unravel mysteries, subscribe to the channel if this resonates so far. Let's build a community exploring how our bodies speak truths often left unspoken but deeply felt. To wrap up this first step, remember that touching someone isn't just about skin meeting skin. It can be an unspoken invitation into another's hidden world if approached mindfully and authentically. And sometimes, just sometimes, that kind of contact plants seeds for longing not easily satisfied until revisited again under gentler stars. Or even beneath flickering city lights where real connection waits quietly behind everyday gestures. But enough pondering for now, there's more beneath all this waiting patiently in the wings. It's intriguing how our skin can carry stories without words, but what if the secret lies not only in the touch itself but also in the space between touches, the pauses, the hesitations, the unsaid moments? There's an aspect often overlooked that Jung hinted at indirectly. The importance of timing and rhythm in physical connection. It's almost like music, where silence is as powerful as sound. This delicate dance of approach and retreat, presence and absence, shapes how deeply a touch resonates within us. Let me tell you about David, a jazz musician living in New Orleans, a city known for its vibrant rhythms and soulful expressions. During a late-night jam session in one of those smoky clubs off Frenchman Street, he found himself interacting with Lena, a dancer whose movements seemed to flow effortlessly with his saxophone. One evening, after their sets were over, they sat by the riverbank under a sky heavy with stars. Their conversation was easy but fragmented by moments of quiet. At one point, David reached out and gently touched Lena's hand, but instead of holding on tightly or pulling her closer immediately, he let his fingers linger lightly then withdraw slowly before returning again. That hesitation created something unspoken but deeply felt. Anticipation. Lena later described it as feeling like the space between heartbeats, a pause that made her aware not just of his touch but of her own reaction to it, an interplay she hadn't noticed before. The timing wasn't rushed or forceful, it respected an invisible rhythm between them. This illustrates how timing and rhythm in touch can awaken our awareness of connection in subtle ways. It's not only the physical sensation but how touches are paced that engages us emotionally and psychologically. Jung might say this aligns with his idea of the psyche's dual nature, conscious and unconscious, where conscious behavior, like deliberate pauses, interacts dynamically with unconscious responses, like anticipation or longing. When we become attuned to this rhythm, we engage both levels simultaneously. Here's an exercise to explore this yourself. Find a willing partner, a friend or loved one, and sit facing each other comfortably. Take turns placing your hands gently on each other's arms or hands, but experiment with varying your touch rhythm, sometimes steady and continuous, other times light and intermittent, sometimes holding still longer than usual before releasing. Notice what feelings arise during different rhythms. Do some make you feel more connected? Nervous? Curious? Can you sense how your body anticipates or responds differently depending on timing? If no partner is available right now, and yes, that happens, try experimenting alone by touching your own arm or hand with varied rhythms while focusing inwardly on sensations and emotions stirred up by each variation. You might realize something surprising. Not all touches have to be constant to feel meaningful. Sometimes it's the intentional pauses that create tension and release, that stir longing or comfort. Switching gears slightly without leaving this theme entirely behind, because timing matters when shifting focus too. Let's talk about another dimension of touch often underestimated: intention behind contact. Picture Sophie, a nurse working in a busy hospital ward in Chicago during early 2024 when influenza cases surged unexpectedly. Amid exhausting shifts and protective gear obscuring smiles, Sophie learned that even small intentional touches, like placing a reassuring hand on a patient's shoulder or briefly holding their wrist while explaining medication, had profound effects beyond clinical care. Patients reported feeling calmer, more understood. These touches weren't casual brushes, they carried empathy intentionally woven into every movement. The difference lay not only in where or how contact was made but why, what emotional energy accompanied it. Jung would likely interpret this as an embodiment of authentic presence, where touch becomes an extension of conscious empathy reaching into another person's unconscious need for reassurance and recognition. To practice cultivating this quality yourself, next time you interact physically with someone you care about, or even acquaintances, slow down deliberately before initiating contact. Think for a moment about what feeling or message you want your touch to convey: comfort, support, celebration? Then proceed gently with that intention firmly held in mind, not robotic or forced but sincere awareness guiding your action. Try journaling afterward about any differences you notice in how you feel giving versus receiving such mindful touches, or if anything unexpected arises internally during these exchanges. This focus on intention adds richness because it transforms touch from automatic gesture into meaningful communication layered with psychological depth. Now here comes something many miss until they experience it firsthand: the power of vulnerability expressed through touch. It doesn't require grand declarations or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it's found simply when someone allows themselves to be touched where they feel most fragile without retreating or masking their discomfort. I once met Carlos, a 29-year-old teacher from Lisbon who shared candidly about struggling with self-esteem issues related to childhood neglect. In therapy sessions incorporating body-oriented approaches inspired by Jungian principles, Carlos began practicing allowing gentle touches on areas triggering anxiety: the back of his neck where tension gathered or his chest where old fears lurked, instead of pulling away reflexively. At first terrifying, he likened it to standing naked before a crowd. Over months he noticed these moments opened doors to acknowledging fears instead of burying them deeper under sarcasm or distraction tactics common among his friends at Barro Alto bars on weekend nights. Vulnerability through touch became for Carlos an act of courage, a way to integrate shadow parts he had long denied. Jung emphasized shadow integration as crucial for wholeness. Here we see it applied physically through conscious acceptance rather than avoidance of uncomfortable sensations triggered by contact. Here's an exercise inspired by Carlos' journey. Find a quiet space where you feel safe. Place one hand on your chest softly while closing your eyes and breathing slowly. As feelings arise, maybe discomfort, fear, warmth, acknowledge them silently without judgment. I see you, it's okay. If possible, invite someone trusted, a close friend or therapist, to replicate this gentle contact while encouraging verbal expression about what surfaces emotionally during those moments if comfortable doing so. The goal isn't perfection or immediate relief but learning tolerance for vulnerability expressed physically, a key step toward deeper intimacy both with others and ourselves. Interestingly enough, and speaking from personal experience, These exercises revealed for me how much modern culture undervalues gentle vulnerability communicated through touch compared to performative toughness expected especially from men raised under traditional norms, which makes embracing softness almost revolutionary nowadays. So consider experimenting carefully yet openly. What happens if you allow small vulnerabilities exposed via simple contact rather than retreating into armor? It may surprise you how craving for such genuine connection grows stronger, and maybe quieter fears begin loosening grip once met directly rather than escaped from repeatedly. Before moving forward though, I wonder about your experience so far. Have any moments stood out where subtle shifts in touch timing altered meaning? Or have you ever tried holding intentions explicitly before making contact? Maybe even experimented letting vulnerability show physically? If so, or even if just curious, I'd love if you'd share below in comments so we can learn together from varied human stories unfolding outside neat psychological theories alone. And speaking naturally about going deeper into these themes beyond theory, I happen to have prepared some guided reflections and practical prompts aimed at enhancing mindful presence during physical encounters which might resonate well if you're intrigued by blending psychological insight with everyday life applications. Anyway, touching upon all these layers reveals just how complex yet accessible human connection really is when approached thoughtfully, not as something mysterious reserved for few, but as something growing patiently through attention paid both outwardly and inwardly simultaneously. And yes, ironic that exploring something as simple as touch requires so much unlearning complexity built around our bodies. But let me leave this part here before we dive into more explorations ahead. There's one aspect of touch I haven't yet mentioned, yet it holds a key to understanding why certain contacts ignite a hunger for more, while others simply fade into background noise: the role of authenticity in our physical interactions. Authenticity here isn't just about being honest or sincere in words. It's about how congruent our inner feelings are with what we express through touch. When there's alignment, the experience becomes electric. When there's dissonance, it feels hollow or even unsettling. Consider Anna, a 42-year-old pastry chef from Lyon who recently moved to Seattle. She described an encounter at a local farmer's market where she bumped into an old friend, Lucas. They hadn't seen each other in years. When he greeted her, his hug was warm but hesitant, almost mechanical, like he was trying to meet social expectations rather than truly reconnect. Later that day, Anna ran into someone else, a fellow baker she'd only met briefly before. Their embrace was simple but genuine, no grand gestures, just presence and acceptance radiating through their bodies as they held each other for a moment longer than usual. Anna realized that the difference wasn't in the strength or duration of the touch but in how authentic it felt, whether each person's inner reality matched what their hands conveyed. Jung's work often hinted that authenticity is central to psychological wholeness. Here it plays out physically as well. Our bodies seem to detect subtle signals, micro-expressions in muscle tone, breath patterns, that betray whether touch is coming from genuine feeling or social pretense. To explore this yourself, try this exercise. Next time you initiate or receive a touch, be it a handshake, hug, or casual brush, pause briefly beforehand and ask yourself internally, what am I really feeling right now? Allow whatever surfaces without editing. Then proceed with the contact, intentionally reflecting your true emotion, whether warmth, reservation, gratitude, or something else entirely. Afterwards, notice how differently your body and mind respond compared to routine touches done without conscious feeling. If no immediate partner is available for this experiment, which happens more often than not, practice by holding your own hand and tuning into inner sensations about authenticity. What parts of you feel open? Closed? Curious? Guarded? This attunement sharpens emotional honesty within physical connection and opens doors to relationships that nourish rather than drain us. Speaking of nourishment brings me back to Anna's story because it also highlights another layer seldom discussed: how societal expectations sometimes pressure us into touch behaviors that contradict our true selves. That mechanical hug from Lucas wasn't his fault alone. It reflected cultural scripts about politeness masking discomfort or detachment. Recognizing these scripts allows us to reclaim agency over our bodies, to say yes or no authentically instead of automatically conforming. This liberation is itself transformative. It reshapes not only individual relationships but also collective norms about intimacy and boundaries. As I reflect on all these layers, the rhythms between touches that stir anticipation, the intentional empathy woven through contact, vulnerability expressed physically, and finally the authenticity grounding everything, I'm reminded how complex yet deeply human this topic is. We're creatures who crave connection yet protect ourselves fiercely from potential harm embedded even in simple acts like touching. There's nothing straightforward about it, but therein lies its profound beauty. I'd like you to imagine something now. A room filled with people standing quietly close enough to feel breaths mingling but none touching at first. Over time, as trust builds naturally without pressure or expectation, some hands begin reaching out gently, not forceful grabs but tentative explorations mirroring desire for genuine connection rooted in mutual respect and truthfulness. That image captures what I hope you take away, not prescriptions for perfect interaction but an invitation into deeper awareness and courage toward authentic contact with yourself and others. Maybe that sounds lofty at first. Maybe it raises questions uncomfortable enough to make you pause, which is good. But even pausing reflects engagement, a movement away from numbness toward presence often missing in our hyper-digitalized world where fingertips tap screens more than flesh. Pause with me a moment longer on this thought. What if longing for meaningful touch isn't merely physical craving but an unconscious call from parts of ourselves yearning for integration? What if every hesitation before accepting touch is an echo of ancient dialogues between protection and vulnerability inside us? And what if learning to listen carefully, with mindfulness not just on external cues but on internal responses, could lead us closer toward wholeness without sacrificing safety? We live in times marked by paradoxes, unprecedented connectivity alongside pervasive loneliness, overwhelming stimuli accompanied by craving stillness, rapid change met with deep-rooted fears about loss of control, all reflected subtly every time skin meets skin. Acknowledging these tensions doesn't simplify matters but enriches understanding by situating personal experience within broader human conditions Jung sought to illuminate through his work on psyche and archetypes. So here's my invitation as we end this exploration together. Allow yourself permission today, not tomorrow or someday, to notice how your body reacts when touched authentically versus superficially. Notice when timing makes you lean in or pull away unconsciously. Notice how intention colors sensation differently than habit does. Notice moments when vulnerability feels risky yet liberating simultaneously. And finally notice where authenticity aligns your inner truth with outer gesture so profoundly that connection almost vibrates beneath surface calm. These observations aren't trivial. They're doorways opening inward paths toward richer relationships with others and yourself alike. Paths rarely linear but deeply rewarding nonetheless. Maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a quiet cafe downtown at sunset. I think about places like Pike Place Market lately, sharing unhurried conversation with someone whose touch feels like homecoming, not because it fits any formula, but because it matches raw honesty pulsing under shared humanity. Until then, keep paying attention to those small moments where touch isn't just contact. It becomes language spoken not only by hands but by hearts learning new dialects every day amid ordinary lives lived imperfectly yet beautifully intertwined. If this speaks even slightly to something stirring inside you right now, well, that's enough reason for gratitude in itself. Because transformation often begins quietly, in noticing rather than forcing, accepting rather than judging, reaching out gently rather than grabbing desperately. And maybe here lies ultimate truth hidden behind all those yearning touches we sometimes barely understand. Connection flourishes best not when clung tightly nor pushed away harshly, but when allowed room breathed softly by authenticity rooted firmly within vulnerability embraced courageously despite uncertainty around next steps ahead. Thank you for journeying through these reflections today, with all their twists and turns imperfectly human as they are. And if curiosity nudges you forward, I'm honored to walk alongside however far you choose next. The night lingers yet, and so does possibility waiting patiently beyond mere skin-deep encounters.